Horrifyingly, a gaunt woman, heavy with child, clutching an old duffel bag containing her entire worldly possessions, tremblingly steps into the lobby of the most luxurious high-rise on the Gold Coast, a place where, just weeks earlier, she was still hiding in a shelter for domestic violence victims, hungry, cold, and utterly desperate. Could she ever have imagined that, right next door to the modest apartment she had miraculously won through a charity raffle, lived the most powerful man in Chicago's underworld, a billionaire by day, a mafia boss by night, and that in the very first moment their eyes met, he would fall into a passionate, all-consuming love so intense he would be willing to burn the world down to protect her. This dramatic love story filled with danger and redemption will keep you glued to every word. Let's dive in right now. Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Alex Truths and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. All right, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. Emily Harper's hands trembled uncontrollably as she clutched the worn duffel bag that held everything she owned in the world. 2 faded nursing scrubs, a few threadbare sweaters, a cracked photo of her late mother, and the last of her canned food from the food bank. It was a chilly October evening in 2025, and the wind whipped through the cracked windows of the rundown bus that had carried her across Chicago's South Side to the Gold Coast, a neighborhood she had only ever seen in magazines. At 28, Emily was bone thin from months of skipping meals to pay rent, her fair skin pale from endless night shifts at the ER and sleepless nights filled with fear. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her once bright auburn hair hung limp and unwashed. Poverty had stripped her bare: eviction notices, unpaid medical bills from her own untreated illnesses, cold nights huddled under a single thin blanket in a shelter when the heat got cut off. She had endured it all after fleeing Derek, the man who had promised love but delivered bruises and control, escalating until one final night when his fists left her curled on the floor, gasping for breath while protecting the tiny life growing inside her. She had discovered the pregnancy just weeks before, a secret that filled her with both terror and fierce determination. Destitute and alone, with no family left after her mother's death from cancer years ago, Emily had entered a hospital charity raffle for domestic violence survivors on a whim during one of her shifts. Against all odds, she won, a modest one-bedroom unit in a gleaming luxury high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan, meant as temporary safe housing. It was her miracle, her chance to disappear. Draining her last $20 for bus fare, she arrived at dusk, her body aching from malnutrition and the weight of the unknown child, her mind a whirlwind of anxiety and guarded hope. The building's lobby was a world she could scarcely comprehend. Marble floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers, the faint scent of fresh flowers from enormous arrangements, doormen in crisp uniforms who nodded politely as she shuffled past, feeling like an intruder in her worn coat and scuffed sneakers. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor made her dizzy, the smooth ascent a stark contrast to the rattling stairs of her old apartment building. Stepping into the hushed hallway, carpeted in plush navy blue and lined with soft lighting, Emily's heart pounded. She fumbled with the keys, her thin fingers numb from the cold, tears pricking her eyes at the overwhelming unfairness of it all. Why her, after so much suffering? That was when she saw him. The door to the neighboring penthouse opened, and out stepped a man who seemed to command the very air around him. Alexander Thorne, Alex to those few who dared familiarity, was 34, fair-skinned, with sharp features framed by neatly trimmed dark hair, his broad shoulders filling out a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Emily could earn in a year of double shifts. His watch caught the light, a subtle flash of wealth, and his presence radiated quiet, unyielding power. As CEO of Thorne Logistics, a sprawling empire of warehouses and shipping routes across the Midwest, he was a billionaire in boardrooms and, secretly, the head of one of Chicago's most formidable Italian-American crime families. But beneath the composed exterior gnawed a consuming remorse, the death of his younger sister Sophia a decade ago, killed by an abusive partner he had failed to stop in time. Guilt tore at him nightly, a violent emotional conflict that hardened his heart against vulnerability, yet left him haunted, questioning the monster he had become. Their eyes met as Emily froze, keys slipping from her grasp with a soft clink. Alex's gaze, piercing blue and unreadable, took her in, the visible bruise fading on her cheek, the way she shrank back instinctively, her malnourished frame trembling. Something stirred in him, an unexpected surge, pity, recognition, and then, shockingly, a fierce protectiveness that bordered on possession. His heart, long armored against sentiment, cracked with gnawing intensity. Who was this fragile woman, carrying fear like a second skin, reminding him so painfully of Sophia's hidden suffering? Emily's breath caught, horror and curiosity warring inside her. He was older, powerful, intimidating, yet his expression held no threat, only a depth that made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. Confusion swirled, numbing her thoughts, her knees weakening as disorientation hit like a wave. "Sorry," she whispered timidly, her voice soft and polite, bending to retrieve the keys with shaking hands. Alex knelt swiftly, picking them up first and handing them over, his fingers brushing hers, warm, steady against her cold ones. The brief touch ignited something overwhelming in him, a passionate pull that tore at his inner walls with violent force. Guilt clashed with this sudden, intense affection, remorse flooding him for the life he led that isolated him from anything pure. "New neighbor?" he asked, his voice low and controlled, though inside turmoil raged. Emily nodded, guarded and fearful, yet unable to look away. In that moment, amid the absurdity of her poverty thrust into his world of wealth, neither could know how profoundly their lives had just intertwined. She slipped inside her door, heart racing with shock and a strange, disorienting warmth. Alex stood there longer, the surge of love, fierce, consuming, and utterly unreasonable, already claiming him, his remorse deepening at the thought of failing another woman who needed protection. Alexander Thorne stood motionless in the shadowed hallway, long after the door to 42B had clicked shut. The faint scent of her, something clean but worn, like hospital soap mixed with exhaustion, lingered in the air, refusing to let him move. His hands still tingled where their fingers had brushed, a simple accidental touch that now burned like a brand against his skin. Inside his chest, something vast and long buried cracked open with violent force. Guilt, remorse, and a sudden, overwhelming surge of protectiveness tore through him, gnawing at the walls he had built after Sophia's death. How many times had he promised himself he would never again allow vulnerability to take root? Yet here it was, fierce and consuming, wrapping around his heart like ivy on marble, passionate, unreasonable, and utterly inescapable. He had seen the bruise on her cheek, the hollows beneath her eyes, the way her thin frame trembled under the weight of that duffel bag. She was running. She was hurting. And in that single glance, Alexander Thorne, the most powerful man in Chicago's hidden underworld, had fallen irrevocably in love. He forced himself back into his penthouse, the door closing with a soft finality that echoed his inner turmoil. The space was a testament to his wealth, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the glittering expanse of Lake Michigan, Italian marble floors that gleamed under recessed lighting, original artwork from galleries in New York and London adorning the walls. A grand piano sat untouched in one corner, a reminder of a life he no longer lived. Everything was perfect, controlled, expensive, and tonight it all felt hollow. He poured himself a glass of aged scotch from a crystal decanter, but the liquor did nothing to quiet the storm raging inside him. Remorse clawed deeper. Remorse for Sophia, for failing her, for becoming the kind of man who ruled through fear because love had once destroyed him. And now this woman, this fragile stranger next door, had awakened something he thought long dead. The intensity of it terrified him. It was not gentle or gradual. It was a violent upheaval, a burning need to shield her from every cruelty the world had already inflicted. Across the wall, Emily Harper leaned against her own door, her breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. The modest apartment, though a palace compared to the shelters and crumbling rooms she had known, overwhelmed her with its quiet luxury. Clean carpets, a kitchenette with appliances that actually worked, a bed with fresh sheets provided by the charity program. Yet none of it eased the dizziness swirling in her head. Her knees buckled and she slid slowly to the floor, thin arms wrapping around her malnourished frame as silent tears fell. Poverty had been her constant companion for years. Nights huddled in emergency room break rooms when she could not afford heat, meals skipped so often that hunger had become a dull, familiar ache, clothes washed in public sinks because the laundromat took coins she did not have. The eviction from her last place had come unfairly, the landlord ignoring her pleas despite her perfect payment record until Derek's harassment made staying impossible. And now, pregnant and alone, the weight of it all crashed down anew. That man in the hallway, Alexander Thorne, she had heard the doorman call him, his presence had shaken her to her core. Wealth radiated from him like heat from a fire, yet his eyes held something deeper, something that made her heart stutter with confusion and a guarded curiosity she dared not name. She rose unsteadily, placing a protective hand over the slight swell of her belly that malnutrition had kept barely visible. The baby was her secret burden, conceived in what she had once foolishly believed was love, now a reminder of her powerlessness. Sleep would not come easily tonight. It never did anymore. The wind rattled the windows, a cold reminder of too many nights spent shivering in threadbare coats. Alexander could not settle. He paced his vast living room, the city lights below mocking his restlessness. Finally, unable to resist, he accessed the private security system he had installed throughout the building years ago. For protection, he had always told himself. Now he used it for something far more personal. The hallway camera showed nothing now, but he pulled up the lobby feed from earlier, watching her arrival again. The way she had shrunk from the doorman's polite greeting, clutching that worn bag like a lifeline. His jaw tightened. Who had hurt her? The bruise was fading, but unmistakable. A violent conflict raged within him, remorse for the life he led that kept him isolated, gnawing guilt that he might bring danger to her simply by caring, and beneath it all, that fierce, burning love that demanded he act. By morning, he had made his decision. He called his most trusted associate, Victor, a man who had been with him since their youth in the old neighborhoods. The new tenant in 42B, Alexander said quietly, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I want everything. Background, employment, relationships, any threats. Discreetly. And Victor, no one touches her. Ever. Victor did not question the intensity in his boss's tone. Alexander Thorne did not make requests lightly. Days passed in quiet observation. Alexander found excuses to be in the hallway, returning from meetings later than necessary, leaving earlier for supposed errands. He saw her come and go in her nursing scrubs, exhausted from night shifts, her steps careful as if expecting the ground to give way. He noticed how she flinched at sudden noises, how her hands trembled when she checked her phone, how she sometimes paused outside her door, listening fearfully before entering. Each sighting tore at him more violently. The disparity between their worlds humiliated her without her knowing it. Her worn sneakers against his polished leather shoes, her tired eyes meeting his across the hall with timid politeness when they passed. One evening, as October winds howled against the building, Alexander watched from his doorway as Emily struggled with grocery bags, cheap canned goods and bread from a discount store, items chosen for price rather than nourishment. One bag tore, spilling cans across the carpet. She knelt quickly, a soft, distressed sound escaping her lips, her thin frame shaking with the effort. Without thinking, Alexander stepped forward. "Let me help," he said gently, kneeling to gather the items. His hands, strong, manicured, adorned with a platinum watch that could have paid her rent for years, brushed hers again as he handed over a can of soup. Emily froze, confusion and fear swirling in her chest. Up close, his wealth was overwhelming. The subtle scent of expensive cologne, the perfect cut of his shirt. "Thank you, sir," she whispered timidly, her voice soft and polite, barely above the wind's howl. Horror gripped her. Why was this powerful man helping someone like her? Yet, beneath the anxiety, a strange warmth stirred, disorienting and numbing. Alexander's heart wrenched at her words, at the "sir" that spoke of such ingrained deference. The surge of love intensified, passionate and burning, clashing violently with his remorse. "Alexander," he corrected softly. "Or Alex. We're neighbors after all." She nodded guardedly, curiosity flickering amid the fear. As she disappeared inside, he stood there, the torn bag in his hand a pitiful symbol of her struggle. That night, the inner conflict nearly consumed him. Guilt for the empire built on shadows, remorse for Sophia, and now this overwhelming need to protect Emily, to give her everything she had been denied. Unseen tensions were building elsewhere. Derek, her ex, had not given up. From Indiana, he had begun making calls, hiring low-level informants to track her. One of Derek's contacts, a rival faction sniffing opportunity, spotted Emily near the building and reported back, seeing dollar signs in harassing Thorn territory. Alexander's world was closing in, and soon the quiet observation would shatter into confrontation. But for now, in the stillness between their doors, two hearts tore themselves apart, one with desperate poverty and fear, the other with wealth and a love so intense it threatened to undo everything he had built. The October nights grew colder in Chicago, the wind slicing off Lake Michigan like a blade, finding every crack in the building's elegant facade. Emily Harper lay awake in her Charity One apartment, the thin blanket pulled tight around her malnourished body, shivering despite the building's promised heat. Sleep had become a stranger, nights haunted by memories of Derek's rage, by the gnawing hunger that never fully left her, even after a meager meal of instant noodles, by the terrifying weight of the child growing inside her, with no doctor to check its heartbeat because she could not afford the copay. Poverty had hollowed her out, cheeks sunken, ribs faintly visible beneath pale skin, hands trembling from low blood sugar and exhaustion after 12-hour ER shifts where she poured care into strangers because she had none left for herself. The unfairness of it all pressed down like an invisible hand, bills piling up for medicines she needed but skipped, the constant fear that one missed shift would mean losing even this fragile sanctuary. Tears came silently, soaking the pillow, as she whispered prayers into the dark for strength she no longer believed she possessed. Across the shared wall, Alexander Thorne stood at his vast window, the city sprawling beneath him like a kingdom he ruled but no longer wanted. His penthouse glowed with understated opulence, custom leather furniture imported from Italy, a fireplace crackling with real wood that scented the air with warmth, shelves lined with first-edition books and artifacts from deals made in shadowed rooms. Yet none of it brought peace. Victor had delivered the background report hours ago. Emily Harper, 28, ER nurse, no family, history of domestic violence, recent escape from an abusive ex named Derek, who had already begun searching for her. The details tore at Alexander with violent intensity, gnawing remorse for Sophia's similar suffering, guilt that his own world of power had never extended to helping women like this before, and beneath it all, that burning, passionate love that had ignited the moment he saw her. It was not gentle affection. It was a fierce, consuming fire that demanded he act, that clashed brutally with his fear of bringing danger to her door. He had sworn after Sophia he would never love again, never risk that devastation. Yet here he was, heart ripping itself apart at the thought of Emily, cold and afraid, mere feet away. The first small crisis came on a Thursday night when the building's power flickered briefly from the storm outside. Emily, bone-tired after a double shift treating overdose patients and car accident victims, stumbled into her kitchenette to heat water for tea, the cheapest comfort she could afford. Exhaustion made her clumsy. The ancient hot plate she had bought secondhand sparked, then smoked alarmingly. Panic surged as flames licked up from the burner, the smoke alarm shrieking to life. She grabbed a dish towel, waving it frantically, but the smoke only thickened, stinging her eyes and throat. Dizzy from lack of food and sudden terror, she backed away, one hand instinctively protecting her belly, horror flooding her. Losing this apartment would mean the streets again, cold winds, no safety for the baby. Tears blurred her vision as she fumbled for her phone to call building maintenance, knowing they might evict her for the damage. Alexander heard the alarm through the walls, sharp, insistent. His security feed confirmed the smoke billowing from 42B. Without hesitation, he grabbed the professional-grade fire extinguisher from his hallway closet, one of many precautions in a life where threats came in many forms, and strode to her door. Knocking firmly, he called her name, voice steady despite the inner storm. Emily opened the door a crack, face pale and streaked with tears, smoke pouring out behind her. Shock rendered her numb. There he was again, Alexander, composed and commanding, holding salvation in his hands. I'm so sorry, she whispered timidly, voice soft and polite, even through the fear. The hot plate. Step back, he said gently, but firmly, entering without waiting for permission. The contrast struck her like a physical blow, his expensive wool coat against her threadbare sweater, his calm efficiency against her trembling helplessness. He located the source in seconds, discharging the extinguisher with practiced precision, white foam smothering the flames. Then he opened windows, fanning the smoke out into the night, his movements sure and unhurried. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, confusion and gratitude warring inside her. Why was this wealthy man helping her again? Suspicion flickered. Men with power always wanted something. But beneath it, a disorienting warmth spread, making her knees weak. "Thank you," she managed, voice cracking. "I don't know what I would have done." Alexander turned to her, his blue eyes softening in a way that tore at his own heart. Up close, her thinness was heartbreaking. The way her collarbones protruded, the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. The surge of love intensified, passionate and burning, clashing violently with remorse. He should have acted sooner, should have found a way to ease her suffering before this. "It's handled," he said quietly. "These older units, the wiring can be temperamental. I'll speak to management about replacing that hot plate. And the alarm system. It's sensitive, but better safe." She nodded, guarded yet curious, the numbness giving way to a strange ache. No one had ever stepped in like this, not without demanding payment in tears or worse. He lingered a moment, the quiet between them thick with unspoken emotion. "Are you all right?" he asked, voice lower now, laced with concern that surprised even him. Emily's eyes filled again, shock at being asked, at being seen. Yes, sir, thank you. The sir slipped out habitually, a remnant of her powerlessness. Alexander, he corrected again, gently. Inside, the word pierced him. How many had called him that with fear, never trust? The inner conflict raged. Guilt for the empire that isolated him, remorse for past failures, and this overwhelming need to protect her, to give her the world she had been denied. Days later, another act followed. Emily's evening walks to clear her head, short, careful circuits around the block because the L train fare ate into her food budget, had not gone unnoticed by Alexander's discreet surveillance. He saw the way she clutched her keys, scanning shadows for threats. One night, he left a small package outside her door. A sleek personal safety keychain with GPS tracking, a loud alarm, and a direct line to emergency services. The note was simple, handwritten in precise script. For your evening walks, stay safe, Alexander. Emily found it after another grueling shift, her body aching from standing hours on swollen feet, hunger a constant companion after giving half her sandwich to a homeless patient. The package confused her. Fearful suspicion at first, then a rush of guarded warmth that left her dizzy. Sitting on her bed, she clipped it to her keys, tears falling anew at the kindness from a stranger whose wealth made her poverty feel humiliatingly stark. Meanwhile, danger stirred. Derek's hired informant, a low-level operative from a rival faction sensing weakness in Thorn territory, had located the building. One evening, as Emily walked back from the corner store with a single bag of rice and beans, a car pulled up slowly, the driver eyeing her with intent. Before he could act, another vehicle cut in sharply, Alexander's, returning from a meeting. He stepped out, fair-skinned features hardened, voice low but carrying unmistakable authority as he confronted the man. Wrong neighborhood, Alexander said calmly, his presence alone enough to send the car speeding away. No blows exchanged, just the weight of reputation and the promise of consequences. Emily witnessed it from the shadows, heart pounding with horror and confusion. He had protected her, again, without knowing she saw. The disparity tore at her, his power against her powerlessness, his wealth against her empty pockets. Yet, in that moment, something shifted, fear mingling with an overwhelming surge of gratitude that bordered on something deeper, more dangerous. Alexander, driving away after ensuring her safety, gripped the wheel tightly. The confrontation had been minor, but the sight of threat near her had unleashed violent inner turmoil, remorse for drawing her into his world, guilt for the love that now consumed him entirely. He would burn cities to keep her safe, and the realization terrified him as much as it freed him. In the quiet aftermath, two souls stood on the precipice, one desperately poor, yet beginning to feel seen, the other powerfully wealthy, yet utterly undone by love. The weight of the secret had been building inside Emily Harper, like a storm gathering over Lake Michigan, dark and inevitable. It was late October now, the winds sharper, rattling the windows of her modest apartment with a persistence that mirrored the ache in her bones. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, knees drawn up despite the slight curve of her belly that malnutrition and exhaustion had kept hidden beneath loose scrubs and oversized sweaters. The free clinic downtown, crowded, understaffed, the only place she could go without insurance, had confirmed it weeks ago, 12 weeks pregnant. The nurse's words echoed in her mind, kind but clinical, while Emily had stared at the grainy ultrasound printout she could not afford to keep. Derek's child, conceived in what she had once mistaken for love, now a living reminder of terror and control. How could she bring a baby into her world of empty cupboards, skipped meals, and nights when hunger pains kept her awake longer than fear? Poverty had already stripped her of dignity, thin wrists that bruised easily from lifting patients, hair falling out in clumps from stress, feet swollen from standing endless hours because sitting meant lost wages. The unfairness clawed at her heart. Why this on top of everything? Tears fell silently as she pressed a trembling hand to her stomach, whispering apologies to the tiny life that deserved better than a mother too poor to buy prenatal vitamins. Across the wall, Alexander Thorne paced his penthouse like a caged lion. The report from Victor spread across his mahogany desk like an accusation. Emily was pregnant. The father, Derek, had a history of violence, restraining orders violated, connections to small-time criminals in Indiana who were now sniffing around Chicago. The knowledge tore through Alexander with violent, unrelenting force. Remorse for Sophia flooded him anew. His sister had hidden her own fears until it was too late, and he had failed her. Now Emily carried the same shadows, the same vulnerability, and the thought of her facing it alone ignited a passionate, burning love that consumed him entirely. It was not pity. It was a fierce, overwhelming possession of the soul, clashing brutally with gnawing guilt. How dare he feel this when his world could endanger her further? Yet the image of her thin frame protecting an unborn child ripped his heart apart. He would raise empires to keep them safe. The revelation came gradually, in quiet moments that built like pressure before a storm. Emily's walks had grown shorter, her steps more careful as morning sickness left her dizzy and weak. One evening, returning from a shift where she had fainted briefly in the break room, blamed on low blood sugar she could not afford to fix, she paused in the hallway, one hand steadying herself against the wall. The world tilted, numbness spreading through her limbs as pain shot through her abdomen, sharp and terrifying. Was this normal? She had no one to ask, no money for a doctor. Fear gripped her, horror at the thought of losing the baby or harming it through her own powerlessness. Alexander emerged from his door at that exact moment, coat draped over his arm, returning from a tense meeting with rivals who were testing boundaries. Seeing her sway, pale and trembling, he moved without thinking, catching her elbow gently but firmly. "Emily," he said, voice low with alarm. The touch steadied her, but sent disorientation crashing through. His warmth against her cold skin, his strength against her frailty. I'm fine," she whispered timidly, voice soft and polite, though tears welled. Confusion swirled. Why did he always appear when she needed help most? Guarded curiosity flickered beneath the fear. "You're not," he replied quietly, guiding her toward her door. "Let me help you inside." She hesitated, suspicion warring with desperation, but exhaustion won. Inside her sparse apartment, the contrast humiliating against his memory of opulent spaces, he settled her on the couch, fetching water from her tap. The quiet between them thickened, charged with unspoken truths. Alexander's inner torment raged. The urge to confess his feelings, to promise her everything, clashed with remorse. He was no savior, only a man steeped in shadows. Yet seeing her curled protectively, hand on her belly, the surge of love intensified, passionate and burning, demanding he shield her and the child as his own. I have to tell someone," Emily finally whispered, voice breaking. Shock rendered her numb as the words spilled out. The pregnancy, Derek's abuse, the terror of raising a child alone with no money, no support. Tears streamed down her thin cheeks, the unfairness of it all violently tearing at her soul. "I can't even buy food sometimes. How can I do this?" Alexander knelt before her, fair-skinned features etched with pain that mirrored her own. The revelation shattered him, violent conflict between guilt for his inability to erase her past and the overwhelming need to claim her future. "You won't do it alone," he said fiercely, voice thick with emotion. "Not anymore." Outside, danger escalated. Derek's informants had grown bolder, one confronting a building staff member for information. Alexander's men intercepted a car circling the block that night. Rivals from an Indiana crew allied with Derek, testing Thorne territory. In a bold, unexpected street confrontation, under flickering streetlights, Alexander faced them personally, stepping from his vehicle with calm authority. "This building is off limits," he stated, presence alone forcing retreat. No blows, just the weight of reputation and implied consequences. He returned shaken, the close call intensifying his inner turmoil. Emily, from her window, glimpsed the scene, horror and confusion gripping her. He was protecting her world without knowing she watched. The disparity numbed her. His power against her powerlessness, his wealth displayed in the sleek car and commanding stance against her empty refrigerator. In the days that followed, small acts continued. Groceries anonymously delivered, filled with nourishing foods she craved but could not afford. Emily's suspicion softened into guarded wonder, the psychological shock of being cared for by this wealthy man tearing at her guarded heart. Quiet moments in the hallway brought tentative conversations, his eyes holding hers with burning intensity that left her dizzy. One night, as wind howled and Emily endured another bout of sickness alone, Alexander knocked softly. She opened the door, pale and trembling. Without words, he enveloped her in a careful embrace, the first human warmth she had felt in years. Shock rendered her breathless, numbness giving way to overwhelming emotion. His heart tore violently, remorse, guilt, and love so passionate it threatened to consume them both. In that condensed stillness, two worlds collided, one desperately poor yet beginning to hope, the other powerfully wealthy yet utterly enslaved by love. The storm was only beginning. The whispers began subtly, like the first cold gusts of late October, sneaking through the cracks of the Gold Coast high-rise. Emily Harper heard them from the doorman one morning as she returned from another exhausting night shift, her thin coat doing little against the wind that whipped off Lake Michigan. Her body ached deeply, malnourished, sleep-deprived, the pregnancy sapping what little strength she had left after hours of lifting patients and cleaning wounds she could barely afford bandages for herself. The doorman, a kind older man named Mr. Reynolds, lowered his voice as he held the door. "Miss Harper, a word of caution about your neighbor, Mr. Thorne. He's, well, old Chicago money. Some say connected, the kind of connected you read about in the papers. Best to keep polite and distant, if you understand." Emily nodded numbly, the words settling like ice in her chest. Connected. She had heard the term before, whispered in ER waiting rooms about powerful men who operated beyond the law. Horror crept in slowly, mingling with the constant anxiety that already kept her awake. Nights when hunger and fear blurred together, when she counted pennies for bus fare while protecting the fragile life inside her. Back in her apartment, she sank onto the couch, dizziness washing over her as confusion tore at her mind. Alexander had been nothing but kind. The fire, the safety keychain, the groceries that appeared without explanation, the way he steadied her when pain struck. Yet now, suspicion bloomed, guarded and fearful. Was his help a debt she could never repay? Men with power always collected. The disparity humiliated her anew, her empty shelves against his world of abundance, her worn scrubs against suits that cost more than her yearly earnings. That evening, curiosity overpowered fear. Wrapped in her threadbare blanket against the cold draft, Emily opened her laptop, a secondhand relic from a hospital donation, and searched his name. The legitimate results painted a picture of staggering wealth. Alexander Thorne, CEO of Thorne Logistics, billionaire with shipping empires spanning the Midwest, features in business magazines, philanthropy for children's hospitals. But deeper searches, forums, old news articles from Chicago papers, whispered darker truths. Ties to old Italian families, unsolved disappearances of rivals, territories controlled with iron authority. Rumors of a sister lost to violence years ago. Emily closed the laptop slowly, shock rendering her numb. Her hands trembled as she placed them over her belly, tears falling for the unfairness of it all, fleeing one dangerous man only to land beside another. Yet beneath the horror, a confusing ache stirred. His eyes, when he looked at her, held no cruelty, only depth that made her feel seen, protected in a way poverty had never allowed. Alexander felt the shift immediately. In the hallway, Emily's gaze averted, her soft, "Good evening," barely audible, timid and polite as always when addressing someone older, someone powerful. She hurried past, leaving the scent of hospital soap and exhaustion in her wake. The distance she imposed tore at him with violent intensity. He had seen her research, his security flagged unusual searches from her IP, and remorse flooded him anew. Guilt for the life he led, for the shadows that now frightened her away. The passionate love that had ignited from the first moment burned fiercer, clashing brutally with inner torment. He wanted to shield her from his world, yet craved to pull her into it, to give her everything, safety, warmth, the child a future without want. Nights found him at his window, staring toward her door, the opulence of his penthouse mocking him, crystal decanters untouched, fireplace roaring pointlessly while she shivered feet away. The distance grew, painful and quiet. Emily avoided the elevator when she heard his footsteps, took stairs despite swollen ankles, her thin frame protesting each step. Unreasonable misfortunes piled on. Her shift schedule changed unfairly, forcing more nights that left her dizzy and faint. A bill arrived for old medical debt she thought forgiven, threatening garnished wages she could barely survive on. Tears came in condensed stillness, sitting alone as wind howled, hand on her belly whispering, "I'm sorry, little one. Mommy's trying." Alexander's torment escalated. Rivals sensed distraction, Derek's Indiana allies pushing Boulder, probing Thorn territory for weakness. One afternoon, as Emily walked to the pharmacy for discounted vitamins she could scarcely afford, a car followed too closely. Panic surged, horror that Derek had found her. Before she could run, Alexander appeared, materializing from a side street in a tense, bold confrontation. He blocked the vehicle with his own, stepping out with calm authority that belied the storm inside. "You're in the wrong place," he said quietly to the driver, voice carrying the weight of consequences unspoken. The car reversed swiftly, retreating without a word. Emily watched from the sidewalk, frozen in shock and confusion, the psychological jolt numbing, protected again by the man she now feared. That night, the rumors culminated. Mr. Reynolds pulled her aside gently. "Miss, some folks say Mr. Thorne's family goes back to the old days. Enforcers, protection rackets. Nothing proven, but be careful." Emily thanked him softly, voice timid, retreating to her apartment where dizziness overtook her. Collapsing onto the bed, pain and disorientation crashed. Why did kindness come wrapped in danger? The violent intensity of her emotions tore her apart, gratitude clashing with terror, the shock of being cared for by someone so powerful, humiliating her poverty further. Alexander, learning of the doorman's words through his network, stood in his vast living room, fist clenched. Remorse gnawed deeper. He had pushed her away with his very existence. The burning love demanded he fix this, yet guilt screamed he would only hurt her more. In quiet moments, he left another gift, a warm coat, anonymously delivered, soft and expensive against her threadbare one. Emily found it, fingers tracing the fine material, tears falling anew at the pity and protection it represented. The distance became unbearable, a condensed emotional stillness, broken only by wind and unspoken longing. Two hearts ripped themselves apart, one desperately poor and retreating into fear, the other powerfully wealthy and imprisoned by a love so intense it threatened everything he was. The storm of rumors had driven them apart, but the threads binding them only tightened, pulling inexorably toward revelation. The distance between them had become a living thing, cold and heavy, pressing against the walls of the Gold Coast high-rise as October drew to its end. Emily Harper moved through her days like a ghost, thin, hollow-eyed, the pregnancy now a quiet ache that joined the constant hunger and exhaustion. Nights were the worst, wind howling through the building's vents, her body curled under the single blanket, malnourished frame shivering while she counted the hours until another shift where she would give care she could not afford for herself. The rumors had rooted deep, fear wrapping around her heart like thorns. She avoided Alexander Thorne at all costs, taking stairs that left her dizzy and breathless, timing her comings and goings to empty hallways. Yet the gifts continued. Warm meals left anonymously, prenatal vitamins in discreet packages, a space heater that appeared one morning when frost first glazed the windows. Each act humiliated her further, reminding her of the chasm between her desperate poverty and his effortless wealth. Tears came in silent waves. Why torment her with kindness if he was the danger the whispers claimed? Alexander felt every inch of her withdrawal like a blade twisting slowly in his chest. His penthouse, with its panoramic views of the glittering lake and city beyond, its custom furnishings and silent staff, had become a prison of remorse. Nights found him standing at the window, scotch untouched, gnawing guilt for Sophia merging with the violent inner conflict of loving Emily so fiercely it threatened to unravel him. The passionate fire that had ignited from their first meeting now burned unchecked, intense, consuming, demanding he bridge the gulf he himself had created. He had scared off another probing car from Derek's allies just yesterday, a tense street confrontation where his mere presence and quiet words forced retreat. No violence, only the weight of power that made men back down. Yet each protection only widened the distance, his love clashing brutally with torment. He was poison to her peace, yet he could not, would not, let her face the world alone. Fate, cruel and capricious, chose the elevator. Emily had waited until the hall was empty before pressing the button, exhausted after a shift that had ended with a patient lashing out unfairly, blaming her for delays she could not control. Her legs trembled on the descent, dizziness threatening as hunger and fatigue converged. The doors opened on the 42nd floor, and there he stood, Alexander, coat in hand, clearly returning early. For a moment, neither moved. Horror flooded Emily, trapped, no escape. She stepped in anyway, backing to the corner, voice soft and timid. "Good evening, sir." The doors closed. The elevator began its smooth descent. Alexander's heart tore with violent intensity. Her fear was palpable, the way she shrank against the wall, thin hands clutching her bag, eyes downcast. Remorse crashed over him. He had done this, driven her away with his shadowed life. Yet the surge of love, passionate, burning, overwhelming, demanded truth. "Emily," he said quietly, voice steady despite the storm inside. "You've been looking into me." She stiffened, shock rendering her numb. The elevator's soft hum filled the silence, the confined space amplifying every breath. Confusion swirled, dizziness making the walls tilt. Yes, she whispered, polite even through terror. "The doorman, and online. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "No apologies," he said gently, turning to face her fully. His fair-skinned features were etched with pain, blue eyes holding hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "You had every right. And you're afraid of what you found." Tears welled, the unfairness of it all violently tearing at her soul, fleeing one monster only to hide beside another. Yet his voice held no threat, only raw honesty that confused and disoriented her. "Are the rumors true?" she managed, voice cracking. "That you're connected? Dangerous?" Alexander's inner world fractured. Guilt for Sophia, remorse for the empire built on shadows, clashed with the burning need to protect her, to claim her trust. Some are true, he admitted, the confession ripping from him like a wound reopening. My world has darkness, men who cross lines, who hurt the innocent. But Emily, I swear to you, I hurt only those who deserve it, those who prey on the weak. The elevator continued downward, each floor a heartbeat in the condensed stillness. Emily's knees weakened, pain and fear mingling with a guarded curiosity she could not suppress. Why help me then? She whispered. The fire, the gifts. I'm nobody. I have nothing to give. The words shattered him. Nobody. The woman carrying life amid such suffering, calling herself nobody. The passionate love surged, overwhelming, demanding he bare his soul. Because I see you, he said fiercely, stepping closer but not touching. I see your strength, working nights while carrying a child alone, enduring what no one should. And because, his voice broke slightly, inner torment peaking. Because my sister Sophia wasn't so lucky. She hid her pain, her fear of a man who hurt her. By the time I knew, it was too late. I failed her. I won't fail you. Shock crashed through Emily. Dizziness, numbness, the world tilting as his grief mirrored her own hidden terror. Tears streamed down her thin cheeks, the psychological jolt of being understood by this powerful man tearing her apart. You lost her? He nodded, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Years ago. It haunts me every day. When I saw your bruises, your fear, I couldn't look away, not again. The elevator dinged softly, reaching the lobby, but neither moved. In that suspended moment, something shifted. Emily's fear softening into overwhelming gratitude and confusion, Alexander's torment easing fractionally under the weight of truth shared. And Derek? She whispered, horror returning as she named her ex. He's looking for me. I know it. Alexander's jaw tightened. He sent someone, a private investigator. I handled it. He's gone. He won't come near you again. Outside, unseen, another confrontation brewed, Derek's allies growing bolder, a car waiting across the street. But inside the elevator, only truth existed. Emily's hand moved instinctively to her belly, the gesture drawing Alexander's gaze. The burning love flared brighter. He saw the child as his to protect already. I don't know what to feel, she admitted softly, voice timid. You've been kind when no one else was. But your world, it scares me. I know, he said, voice thick with emotion. And I'll keep my distance if that's what you need. But Emily, please believe this. You and your child will never want for anything again. Not safety, not care, not... He stopped, the confession of love too vast, too soon. The doors opened to the empty lobby. Emily stepped out first, legs unsteady, heart violently torn. Fear, gratitude, and the first fragile threads of trust weaving through the confusion. Alexander watched her go, inner conflict raging anew, remorse for burdening her, passionate love demanding he fight for her heart. In the quiet that followed, two souls stood transformed, one beginning to glimpse light amid poverty's darkness, the other willing to face his own shadows for the chance to love again. The elevator confession had cracked the walls. What poured through would change everything. The elevator confession had cracked something open between them, but it had not yet healed the fear. Emily Harper returned to her apartment that night with legs that barely carried her, the walls spinning in dizzy confusion. She leaned against the door, thin hand pressed to her chest, as if to still the violent pounding of her heart. Alexander's words echoed. His sister, his failure, his promise. Kindness from a man whose world terrified her. The disparity tore at her soul, her empty refrigerator humming softly in the corner, the single bulb casting weak light over threadbare furniture, while he lived in unimaginable luxury mere feet away. Poverty had taught her to distrust gifts. They always came with chains. Yet the way he had looked at her, grief raw in his eyes, had stirred something deeper than suspicion, a guarded warmth that frightened her more than the rumors. Tears fell as she sank to the floor, malnourished body trembling from cold and emotion. How could she accept protection from darkness when she had barely escaped it? Alexander stood in his penthouse long after the elevator doors closed on her retreating figure, the silence deafening amid the opulence that now felt like mockery. Crystal chandelier casting prisms on marble floors, the fireplace roaring with imported wood while she shivered alone. Remorse clawed deeper than ever. For Sophia, for the shadows he cast over Emily's fragile hope. The passionate love that had burned from the first moment now raged unchecked, intense, consuming, demanding he shield her from every cruelty, including himself. Inner torment ripped him apart. Guilt screamed he would taint her, yet the thought of her facing Derek's threats alone was unbearable. He poured scotch with shaking hands, the liquid untouched as he stared into the flames. The blow came 2 days later. Emily returned from a grueling shift, another unfair schedule change, leaving her faint from skipped meals, to find a black vase outside her door. Inside, a dozen dead red roses, wilted and brittle, petals crumbling at the touch. No card needed. Derek's signature from every fight, every threat. I see you. I'm still here. Horror crashed through her like ice water, dizziness, numbness, knees buckling as she clutched the wall. He had found the building. The baby kicked faintly, a reminder of vulnerability she could not protect. Tears blurred her vision. The unfairness violently tore at her heart, fleeing across states, draining every cent for safety, only to be hunted again. Powerless, destitute, she slid to the floor amid the dead petals, sobs racking her thin frame. Across the hall, Alexander's security alerted him instantly, unfamiliar delivery caught on camera. He strode out, finding her crumpled and shaking. The sight shattered him. His love, his Emily, reduced to this by a coward's cruelty. Kneeling, he gathered the vase gently away. "Emily," he whispered, voice thick with restrained fury and tenderness. She looked up, eyes wide with terror and confusion. "He knows," she managed, voice soft and broken. "The roses, it's him." Alexander's inner world fractured. Remorse for failing to end the threat sooner. Passionate love demanding he act now. "You're safe," he said fiercely. "Come with me." She hesitated, guarded fear warring with desperation, but the numbness won. He led her into his penthouse, the contrast a physical blow. Vast rooms bathed in warm light, plush carpets underfoot, the scent of fine leather and wood smoke. Emily stood frozen just inside, dizziness returning at the wealth displayed. Artwork on walls that could feed her for years, furniture handcrafted and elegant. Humiliation burned, her worn coat against his world of abundance. Alexander confirmed with Victor over the phone, voice low and lethal. Derek was flying in. Rivals had escalated, a bold probe near the building earlier that day. Another tense street confrontation where Alexander's presence alone forced retreat. No violence, only the promise in his stance. Emily listened, horror deepening. "He's coming here," she whispered, hand protective over her belly. Alexander turned to her, inner torment peaking. "He won't touch you. Stay here, in my guest suite. Let me handle this." The offer hung in the quiet, condensed stillness, thick with emotion. Confusion tore at Emily. Refuge in the home of a man whose darkness she feared, yet whose kindness had become her only light. Tears fell anew, the psychological shock of poverty yielding to protection, of being wanted by someone so powerful. "Why?" she asked softly, timidly. "Why do this for me?" He stepped closer, not touching, eyes burning with intensity. "Because I can't not," he confessed, voice raw. "Because losing you would destroy me more than anything my world has ever thrown at me." Shock rendered her breathless. Dizziness, numbness, the world tilting as his words sank in. A man like him, destroyed by her? The violent intensity of her emotions peaked, gratitude clashing with fear, the overwhelming surge of being cherished tearing her guarded heart open. She nodded, accepting refuge. He led her to the guest suite, larger than her entire apartment, bed plush with linens she had only seen in magazines, windows framing the lake. As she sank onto the edge, exhaustion claiming her, Alexander stood in the doorway, heart ripping apart. Remorse for dragging her deeper into his life, passionate love vowing to make it right. Outside, tensions mounted. Another unexpected confrontation, as Alexander's men intercepted a scout near the building, dispersing them with quiet authority. Inside, in the warmth she had never known, Emily drifted to sleep, protected for the first time in years. Two souls, bound by confession and crisis, teetered on the edge of something irreversible, one finding refuge amid wealth, the other willing to face hell to keep her there. The dead roses lay discarded, but their shadow lingered, pushing them closer to the storm ahead. The days inside Alexander Thorne's penthouse blurred into a strange, fragile sanctuary. Emily Harper moved through the vast rooms like a shadow, afraid to touch the fine linens, the polished surfaces, the luxury that surrounded her on every side. The guest suite alone was larger than any home she had ever known, with a bed so soft it swallowed her exhaustion, windows framing Lake Michigan's restless waves. Yet even here, poverty's ghosts clung to her. The thinness of her wrists as she held a cup of real coffee, the way her body ached from months of malnutrition, the constant, quiet humiliation of accepting charity from a man whose world still frightened her. She ate the nourishing meals left discreetly outside her door. Fresh fruit, warm soups, foods she had only dreamed of. But each bite tasted of dependence. Nights brought no rest. Wind howled against the glass, and she lay awake, hand on her belly, tears falling for the unfairness of hiding in wealth, while Derek hunted. Alexander kept his distance, respecting the space she needed, yet his presence filled the penthouse like a storm held at bay. He worked in his study, coordinating with Victor, turning the building into a fortress, additional security at entrances, hidden cameras on their floor. Rivals pressed harder. Derek's arrival in Chicago had emboldened them. Twice in those days, Alexander faced tense confrontations on the street below. Once blocking a suspicious vehicle with his own, voice low and authoritative as he warned them off. Another time stepping between a scout and the lobby doors, his mere stance forcing retreat. No violence, only the unyielding weight of power that made men reconsider. Each time he returned, inner torment raged fiercer, remorse for drawing danger closer, passionate love burning to protect her at any cost. The plan formed quietly. Alexander's team tracked Derek's desperation. He had hired new muscle, local men willing to cross lines for pay. To end the threat without endless hiding, they would lure him out. A fake text from an unknown number, claiming to be police. Emily's apartment had been broken into. She needed to come identify items. She showed Alexander the message, voice trembling. "He's trying to get me outside." Alexander's jaw tightened, heart ripping with violent conflict. "We give him what he wants," he said calmly, "but not how he expects." Emily's fear peaked, horror at the risk, confusion at trusting a man whose darkness she now knew. Yet in his eyes she saw only fierce protection, the same burning intensity that had stirred her since the elevator. "You'll be safe," he promised. "My people will be everywhere." The day came, cold and gray. Emily stepped out of the building, surrounded invisibly by Alexander's men, professionals blending into crowds, ready. Her steps were careful, thin frame wrapped in the warm coat he had given her, heart pounding with anxiety that left her dizzy. Derek waited, hidden with 3 hired men, faces hard with criminal intent. They moved to intercept. But Alexander had prepared. His team materialized like shadows, efficient, trained, disarming the thugs within seconds, zip-tying them silently as crowds passed unaware. Derek, seeing his plan crumble, bolted. Alexander pursued, catching him 2 blocks away in a narrow alley where cameras did not reach. He slammed Derek against the brick wall, pinning him with unyielding strength. "You are going to listen," Alexander said, voice quiet but laced with lethal calm. The inner storm raged, remorse for what he might become, passionate love for Emily demanding justice. Derek snarled defiance, but fear cracked his voice. Alexander's words were precise, dismantling the man's world, naming past crimes, violations, the extortion ring. "If you ever come near her again, I will end everything you are. Your freedom, your name, gone." Evidence waited, ready for authorities. Derek crumbled, nodding frantically. Emily, watching via hidden feed in the penthouse, felt horror give way to overwhelming relief, and then something deeper. As Alexander prepared to walk away, ensuring permanent retreat, she saw the mercy in restraint. He had the power to destroy utterly, yet chose not to become the monster. In the aftermath, Derek fled Chicago within hours, life unraveling as anonymous evidence reached authorities. Emily waited in the penthouse, tears streaming, not just for escape, but for the man who had risked everything for her. When Alexander returned, eyes shadowed with the weight of what he had almost done, she met him in the hallway. "You let him go," she whispered, voice soft and awed. "I gave him a warning he can't ignore," he replied, voice rough. "For you." The quiet between them thickened, charged with unspoken truth. Emily stepped closer, hand reaching for his. Shock and gratitude crashed through her. The psychological jolt of poverty yielding to protection, of being cherished by someone so powerful. "You saved us," she said, tears falling. "Me and the baby." Alexander's heart tore open completely. The passionate love, burning since the first moment, overwhelmed him. He pulled her gently into his arms, holding her thin, trembling frame against his strength. Remorse, guilt, and love clashed violently, but in her embrace, peace flickered. "You're safe now," he murmured, "both of you." In that condensed stillness, amid wealth she had never known and poverty she was leaving behind, Emily felt the first true surge of trust and something warmer, deeper, beginning to answer his fire. The ambush had ended the threat, but mercy had bound them irrevocably. 2 hearts, torn and healing, stood on the brink of forever. The weeks following Derek's retreat should have brought peace, but peace was a luxury neither Alexander Thorne nor Emily Harper had ever truly known. The Gold Coast penthouse, once a temporary refuge, became Emily's quiet haven. She moved through its vast spaces with growing wonder, fingers trailing over soft fabrics she had never touched, eating meals prepared with care that filled the hollows of her thin frame for the first time in years. The pregnancy advanced, her belly now curved gently, a visible reminder of the life she protected. Yet poverty's scars lingered deeply, nights when old fears woke her shivering despite the warmth, moments of dizziness when she caught her reflection, still pale, still fragile, and remembered the cold winds endured in shelters, the skipped meals, the humiliating charity lines. Alexander's wealth surrounded her like a dream, private doctors visiting discreetly, prenatal care she could never have afforded, clothes that fit her changing body without threadbare patches. The disparity no longer humiliated, it awed, confusing her heart with gratitude that bordered on something deeper, warmer. Alexander watched her transformation with a love that burned fiercer each day, passionate, intense, all-consuming since the first moment he saw her trembling in the hallway. He kept distance when she needed it, yet every glance tore at him, remorse for the danger he had brought, gnawing guilt that his world might still taint her light. He accelerated plans to legitimize Thorn Logistics, selling shadowed operations at great risk, determined to give her and the child a cleaner future. Inner conflict raged violently, torment at the man he had been, burning need to become the one she deserved. But betrayal brewed in the shadows he thought secure. Marco, Alexander's consigliere for over a decade, had watched the changes with growing resentment. Once Alexander's closest confidant, Marco saw the boss's distraction, meetings missed, territories softened, as weakness. Rivals whispered offers, help destabilize Thorn, claim power. Jealousy festered. Marco wanted the empire for himself. Quietly, he began feeding information, building layouts, security patterns, to an allied faction still smarting from Alexander's confrontations. The attack came without warning. Emily, feeling stronger, decided to retrieve the last of her belongings from her old apartment. Small keepsakes, a photo of her mother, items too pitiful to leave behind. Alexander protested gently, inner torment flaring at the risk, but she insisted softly, voice timid yet determined. "I need to close that chapter," she whispered. He relented, assigning discreet protection. She entered the modest unit alone, heart heavy with memories of fear and want. As she packed the worn duffel, glass shattered, bullets tearing through the windows in a drive-by orchestrated with precision. Marco had timed it perfectly, framing rivals to spark war and force Alexander back to old ways. Emily dropped to the floor, horror crashing through her, dizziness, numbness, pain as glass rained. She curled protectively around her belly, sobs racking her thin body. The unfairness violently tore her soul. Finally safe, finally healing, only to face death again. Alexander received the alert instantly. Rage and terror collided, remorse for letting her go alone, passionate love propelling him like fire. He raced downstairs, arriving as his men secured the scene. Finding Emily amid the wreckage, trembling and tear-streaked, he shielded her with his body as stray shots echoed. A bullet grazed his shoulder, hot pain he ignored, taking it to cover her completely. "Emily," he gasped, pulling her close amid chaos. His men neutralized the threat, dispersing attackers with trained efficiency. Shock rendered her numb, his blood on her hands, his strength faltering yet unyielding. "Alexander," she whispered, voice breaking. The psychological jolt was devastating. Poverty had taught her abandonment, yet here he bled for her. In the ambulance, he refused treatment first, eyes locked on hers. Inner torment peaked, guilt for failing again, burning love vowing vengeance and reform. "You're safe," he murmured, hand on her belly. "Both of you." Discovery came swiftly. Vare uncovered Marco's communications. Betrayal from within, the cruelest cut. Alexander confronted him in a tense, private meeting. No violence, only cold authority, as Marco was removed permanently from power, exiled, with warnings that ensured silence. Emily, bandaged and resting in the penthouse hospital suite Alexander had prepared, wept for the shock of it all. The attack had stripped her bare again. Fear for the baby, horror at nearly losing him. Yet, in the condensed stillness of recovery, gratitude surged, overwhelming, confusing, tearing her heart open to the truth. She loved him. The man who had taken a bullet for her, who had shown mercy when he could have destroyed. Alexander sat beside her bed, shoulder bound, eyes haunted. "I brought this on you," he confessed, voice raw. "My world." "No," she whispered softly, hand reaching for his. You saved us. Again. In that moment, suspicion fully yielded to love. Passionate, intense, mirroring his own. Two hearts, torn by betrayal yet bound tighter, began to heal amid wealth and protection she had never dared dream of. The shocking twist had nearly destroyed them, but mercy and love pulled them through, stronger for the scars. The private hospital suite in Alexander Thorne's preferred medical center overlooked the same restless Lake Michigan, but the view brought no comfort. Machines beeped softly, monitoring the man who had taken a bullet meant for her. Alexander lay pale against crisp white sheets, fair-skinned features drawn with pain, shoulder heavily bandaged where the graze had torn flesh and muscle. Wealth had secured the best care. Top surgeons flown in, a room more sweet than sterile ward, with leather chairs and fresh flowers that mocked the wilted roses that started it all. Yet even here, the disparity haunted Emily Harper. She sat beside his bed in clothes borrowed from his penthouse, soft and fine against her still thin frame, while memories of hospital charity wards, cold benches, unpaid bills, nights shivering in waiting rooms, clawed at her heart. Poverty had taught her to expect loss. Now, sitting vigil, she feared it more than ever. Emily had not left his side since the ambulance. Shock had numbed her at first, dizziness, numbness, the world tilting as his blood stained her hands. The drive-by, Marco's betrayal, the bullet he took shielding her and the unborn child, it all crashed over her in waves. Tears fell silently as she held his hand, thin fingers intertwined with his strong ones. Horror at nearly losing him, confusion at the depth of her feeling, gratitude that violently tore her soul. A man of power and shadows had bled for her, a destitute nurse who had nothing to offer but a broken past and a fragile future. The unfairness of it all, surviving Derek only to face betrayal from within Alexander's world, ripped at her with unrelenting intensity. Alexander drifted in and out, pain medication clouding his mind, but her presence anchored him. Inner torment raged even in delirium, remorse for Marco's treachery, gnawing guilt that his empire had nearly killed the woman he loved and the child he already claimed as his own. The passionate love, burning, intense, overwhelming since the first moment, flared brighter through the haze. He had failed Sophia. He would not fail them. When he fully woke, late into the night, the room was dim, lit only by monitors and city glow through windows. Emily slept fitfully in the chair, head resting on the bed near his hand, thin frame curled protectively even in exhaustion. The sight shattered him, her devotion amid his failure. "Emily," he whispered, voice rough. She startled awake, eyes wide with fear that melted into relief. "Alexander," she breathed, voice soft and timid, tears spilling instantly. She gripped his hand tighter, the psychological shock crashing anew. Poverty had isolated her, yet here she was, cherished in wealth's embrace. "You're safe," he murmured, thumb brushing her knuckles. "The baby?" "Fine," she whispered, hand moving instinctively to her belly. "Thanks to you." Sobs broke free, horror, gratitude, love, surging in a confusing, numbing torrent. "You took a bullet for us. Why? I'm nothing. I had nothing." The words pierced him deeper than the wound. Violent inner conflict erupted. Remorse for the danger, guilt for binding her to his shadows, burning love demanding truth. "You're everything," he said fiercely, voice thick with emotion. "From the first moment I saw you, trembling, bruised, stronger than anyone I've known, I loved you, passionately, completely. I would take 1,000 bullets to keep you safe." Shock rendered her breathless, dizziness, numbness, tears streaming as his confession tore her world open. A man like him, wealthy, powerful, haunted, loving her, a woman who had endured cold winds and empty cupboards. The intensity violently ripped at her heart, gratitude clashing with unworthiness, fear yielding to overwhelming surge. "I was so scared," she confessed, voice breaking. "Losing you, after everything you've given me, safety, care, a future." She leaned closer, forehead resting against his. "I love you, Alexander. I tried not to. Your world terrifies me. But I do, fiercely." The words unleashed him. Inner torment peaked, then shattered, remorse easing under love's fire. He cupped her face gently, mindful of pain, pulling her into a kiss that was raw, desperate, all-consuming. Lips met with teeth and tears, years of withheld emotion exploding, his passionate love finally claiming, hers answering with equal intensity. It was messy, life-affirming, born of vigil and near loss. In that hospital room, surrounded by beeping machines and wealth's quiet luxury, they gave in completely. Careful of his wound, yet urgent with need, they came together, intimate, passionate, souls bared. Emily whispered against his skin, "I choose you, all of you." The psychological shock of poverty's survivor finding explosive love tearing her open to joy. Alexander held her close, torment yielding to peace. "You're my redemption, my family." The betrayal had nearly destroyed them, but in the vigil's stillness, love, fierce, explosive, mutual, forged them unbreakable. Two hearts, torn by pain yet healed in passion, emerged stronger, ready for whatever shadows remained. 1 year had passed since the night bullets shattered windows and nearly shattered lives, and Chicago had moved into a gentle autumn once more. Emily Harper, now Emily Thorne, stood on the rebuilt private balcony of the penthouse, the same one where so many quiet confessions had been shared. The wind off Lake Michigan was cool, but no longer cruel. It carried the scent of changing leaves rather than the bite of winter. In her arms nestled their daughter Sophia, named for the sister Alexander had lost, a bright-eyed girl with her mother's auburn curls and her father's determined gaze. Emily's body had filled out beautifully, cheeks rounded with health, strength returned after months of proper meals and care. The thin, malnourished woman who once shivered through cold nights on charity cots was gone, yet she remembered her always. Poverty's lessons were etched deep, the humiliation of empty cupboards, the terror of unpaid bills, the nights when hunger and fear blurred into one endless ache. Those memories made every moment of plenty feel like a miracle, every warm embrace a gift she would never take for granted. Alexander joined her, wrapping strong arms around them both from behind, his shoulder long healed but carrying a faint scar, a reminder of the bullet he had taken without hesitation. Thorne Logistics had transformed under his determined guidance. Illegal operations sold off at great personal cost, legitimate ventures expanded, clean partnerships forged. It had not been easy. Tense confrontations with former allies who resisted change, bold street meetings where his presence alone turned threats away. No violence, only the quiet authority of a man choosing a different path. Wealth remained, private jets for family trips, foundations funding shelters for women like Emily once was. But it served love now, not power. Their love had blossomed into something fierce and unbreakable. From the hospital vigil where passion first exploded, raw, desperate, life-affirming, it had grown into daily fire, quiet mornings with coffee and laughter, nights of intense closeness that healed old wounds, moments when Emily would trace his scar and whisper gratitude, Alexander holding her as if she might vanish. The disparity that once humiliated her now deepened their bond. Her understanding of want made his generosity profound. His remorse for past shadows made her forgiveness sacred. Love transcended wealth and poverty, skin color and station. It was simply human, compassionate, eternal. Sophia cooed, reaching for the skyline, and Emily laughed softly, the sound bright and free. Alexander turned her gently to face him, blue eyes burning with the same passionate intensity that had claimed him from the first moment. "Marry me again," he said quietly, pulling a new ring from his pocket. Simple, yet stunning, a diamond flanked by deep blue Lake Michigan sapphires. "Renew our vows, here, with our daughter." Tears filled Emily's eyes. Joy, not sorrow. "Yes," she whispered, voice no longer timid but strong with love. 1,000 times yes. They renewed vows privately on that balcony as the sun set, city lights flickering on like promises kept. Sophia in her arms, Alexander's hand over theirs, they spoke words of forever. No grand ceremony, just truth, love, family. Life lessons flowed gently from their story. Knowledge that compassion crosses every divide. Knowledge that love is stronger than fear. Knowledge that redemption is possible. Knowledge that protecting the vulnerable is the truest power. Knowledge that no one is beyond saving. Lesson after lesson in forgiveness, in choosing mercy over vengeance. Lesson in building rather than destroying. Lesson in opening hearts once closed by pain. Lesson in seeing worth where society sees lack. Lesson in family found, not just born. Education in resilience, in gratitude for every meal after hunger. Education in trust after betrayal. Education in love's ability to heal the deepest scars. Examples in standing firm for what is right. Education in the beauty of second chances. Derek rotted in prison, old crimes finally catching him. Marco had vanished into exile, a quiet end to betrayal. Rivals learned boundaries or faded away. Emily's nonprofit clinic for abuse survivors thrived, funded generously, yet anonymously at first, then openly, proudly. She spoke publicly now, voice steady, sharing her journey from destitute nights to fierce love, proving wealth and poverty could not separate compassion. On that balcony, under stars and city glow, Alexander held his family close. Love, passionate, intense, explosive, had conquered all. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If it touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel Alex Truths, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear that love and compassion know no boundaries. Tell me in the comments, how did this story make you feel? Does it connect to moments in real life where knowledge of kindness, lessons in forgiveness, or education in resilience changed everything for you? I read every comment and listen to the emotions from deep within your hearts. Wishing you all good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. See you in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.